Hello, and welcome to an episode of Escaping Samsara podcast. And I'm joined here today by Scott Johnson, Prem Carlisi, and Mark Roberts. And we're here to do, as far as I know, the first ever roundtable discussion on Ashtanga and fatherhood. So, Mark and I are new fathers, and Scott is an experienced father. Prem is a grandfather. So we've got, a bit of a range here for you. So just to kick us off, like Mark, would you be able to tell us, a bit about yourself and where you are with your fatherhood journey?
So I'm a new father. My daughter turned 15 months today. Um, I'm a kind of an old father too. I'm 47 next month, so I kind of came into fatherhood pretty late, you'd say,
Yeah,
but never too late. Always the right time, I
yeah,
guess you could always say. You would say. I don't know, man. Like I didn't think I was going to be a father. I didn't think it was in my destiny.
mm,
Um, but now that I am a father, I couldn't imagine life without my daughter. Like it's the greatest, most wonderful, incredible gift. There's not enough adjectives. Like every day when I'm with her, I'm just filled with so much love, and it's just like it's doesn't seem there's no like bottom to how much love there is, just every day, just if I'm with her and this love just keeps welling up. And I keep thinking to myself, does this like ever stop, or does it just keep going and growing like this? So it's pretty beautiful because I've never experienced anything like that before.
yeah,
So
nice.
I'm just, yeah, very, very happy and stoked to be a father. So I can say it's been pretty not good for my asana practice, but I had achieved everything that I wanted to do basically in my
Yeah,
asana practice. So I've been pretty happy just to let that go, and really focus on parenting.
yeah,
So, I don't want to take all the time up, but basically my sort of routine is I wake up around 6 and I go for a quick surf. That's what I've been doing at the moment. Go for a quick surf, come back, then Deepika and Davy are awake, and then it's on. That's on. It's like
yeah,
non-stop for the rest of the day pretty much. So I like to take it to the beach pretty much straight away in the morning around 7:30. Take it to the beach. That then Deepika can
yeah,
do her practice. Take it to the beach, come back, make a breakfast, and do all that kind of stuff. And then by around 10:30, I hand her off again, and then I do a little movement practice or whatever. I usually don't really feel like doing much asana at that time, so I'm doing other stuff at the moment, doing some handstands and a little bit of actually I've been doing a little bit of weightlifting, just mixing it up a little bit.
cool.
Um, and then it's on again from like she has a nap and then she wakes up 1 o'clock and then that's it. Back on until bedtime.
uh, wow. Yeah,
Cool.
With
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I mean the
Um,
lockdown and COVID, everything's been pretty good in the sense of really being able to focus on parenting.
yeah, yeah,
yeah, thanks, Mark. And yeah, totally relate to what you're saying about just the love. It's just such a beautiful experience. So yeah, Prem, could you tell us about yourself and where you're at with your journey in fatherhood and asana or yoga in general?
well, we're gonna jump to me.
Yeah, that's
This
the
is
order I
yeah.
told you that we're
This
gonna go in.
this is the end product. No, I was laughing along with you, Mark, because I vividly remember the experience of uh, being at the birth of both of my daughters,
Yeah,
and it was a miracle. It was such a miracle. It was so
that's
wonderful,
American.
so amazing, so amazing. And we had both of our daughters at home. Oh my God, she was unbelievable. We videotaped it. It was so beautiful, and she was a very very. Some of you know that are listening or watching. Some of you maybe don't know, but my daughter Shanti passed away in 2013 in July 18th. So not it's a few days back. It's the 8-year anniversary of her memorial, and so you know, um, of course, devastating, um, as you can imagine, and it still touches me. I miss her so much. Um, but this is really good because I was really looking forward to talking to you guys and everybody about just what you mentioned, Mark, just the miracle of life and the miracle of being there with your child when they're born and then watching them growing up. You guys are in for such an adventure. It doesn't stop, you guys. It doesn't stop. It just gets better and better. There's so many things, and of course, just like life, there's the good and the bad and the ugly. You go through all kinds of stuff with them, and in your own life of like trying to figure out like work and money and do I go surfing or how's my yoga practice? I remember all that stuff, Mark and Nathan, like in the beginning, and what to do about it. Where's my priority? And so there was, it was so beautiful in the beginning of having these two little girls, and having, there's something about having like the teamwork of it too, like I had a wife at the time that we had really good values. We weren't getting along relationship wise. So there was some turmoil in our relating with each other. So one of the things that I really see in my own experience of it is the value of working together with your mate, with your partner, and also having other people around, like uncles and aunties, not just a physical, bloodline, but like friends and family that are there to help. And I know it's really difficult right now with the lockdown or the lockup or whatever you want to call it. But I feel like that was really something that seemed to be very essential in my beginning of that you can't do it alone. It starts to get a little bit overwhelming. You guys are in the initial phase of it, 1 year, a little bit more than 1 year. So,
Oh
there's
yeah,
that.
it's already overwhelming many times.
Yeah, of course, brother.
Yeah,
Of course. It's
especially
it's
in the
intense,
lockdown
man.
in India.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's right. You guys were in India lockdown.
yeah.
Sheesh. Yeah. I mean, there's so much to talk about in regards to this. It's such a great topic, and thank you, Nathan, for
And what about becoming
opening
a
it up.
grandfather, Prem? That happened recently,
Yeah.
right? Was that? How was
Well,
that? How was that similar or different to being a father the first time?
well, okay, you got to remember that I was in the era of no internet and no. Um, I mean, when I was studying with Patabi Joyce back in '79 in India, it took 3 months to get a letter through to America as a communication. And if I wanted to make a phone call, I had to book a phone call, and it took like basically a day or two for them to organize the phone line for me to get a call through to my mom or whoever I wanted to. It was like insane. So the beauty of having like the internet, and my daughter just moved. She just basically landed in back in America. She was living in Germany with her husband on an Air Force base. He's in the military, and I've visited them several times before the whole COVID thing, and it was like how beautiful it was. And also when she was born, she's 6 now. So when she was born, her and my daughter Mira came to my 60th birthday. I'm 60. I'm going to be 66 in November. So they were there at my 60th birthday. So I got to see her very, just pretty much just born. She's going to be in August will be her 6th birthday. So it was like, being with her and being a grandfather. It's like, really? I'm a grandfather? Like, I mean, I look like it. I got the beard and all that, but I never ever felt my age ever. never ever did I ever feel like old. And so it's been really cool. I mean, now that they're away and I'm not like right next to them, we've been, WhatsApping, FaceTiming, whatever we can, and I have fun with her online. I wish I was closer, obviously, to be right with them. But they just, like I said, they just moved to mainland America. They moved to Arkansas, of all places. So, but we're looking forward to going back this Christmas. Hopefully, hopefully, if we can get out of Bali and be able to go to America, and yeah, I definitely want to visit them and be granddad, grandpa.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Thanks, Prem.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing
yeah,
that.
sure.
So,
Yeah,
Scott,
you're welcome.
you have three boys, which it must be parenting sort of another level. Uh, so how was that? And because one of the things that's interesting about you is, and I don't know, I don't know if I remember your story correctly, but you started a lot of your Ashtanga journey came after you were already a father. So it wasn't a case of like, oh, I had this big asana practice and then I had to adjust it because I had kids. It was more like, no, you had kids the whole time, and you sort of built
Yeah.
this whole shala and teaching practice and stuff the whole time. So yeah, what was that like?
I mean, so like I was a father at 29. I'm like 48 now. So yeah, well, I was a father at 29, 28, 29, something like that. And I kind of like from a young age, I always thought I'd quite like to have a big family. I'd like to have a family. And I've always wanted to be, I think my dad was like, no disrespect to you, Mark, right? But my dad was older. My dad was older, right? So I was like, I'd quite like to have a young dad. Do you know what I mean? Even though you're almost the one, Mark, you're almost the one most young heart people I know. So
Yeah.
Debbie's gonna have a beautiful time with you. But I thought to myself, it'd be nice to be a young parent. And so yeah, we got when I was 28, and I married Louise, and 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 we had Herbie, and literally about 6 months, I think, it was actually 6 months after Herbie was born, I started practicing Ashtanga.
Oh, wow.
And I come from this kind of I do come from this flip side as a father and practicing of Ashtanga, and actually, but my children are older than my practice. So I've always grown my sadhana in relationship to family life and tried
Yeah.
to see how that kind of works together. And it's been an amazing journey. I mean, before we got on, we were reflecting on like the birth story. The birth of all three of them were like three of the most profound moments of my life, especially Herbie being born the first. It was like it was almost something bordering on spiritual. um
Yeah.
and I always looked at it as like, I think even then we had really great midwives around. We made it so like you did, Prem. We had the first two at home. Ethan, our youngest one, was at hospital. But the birthing at home was just like, when it was at home, it was incredible. It was just like, really, we had a midwives there who were really connected to us. And so I literally, it was a really interesting, because we were reflecting this before we came on. I quickly understood, or tried to understand, my place in the scheme of this way of evolution happening at this moment. So, for example, Louise giving birth, the midwives being there. What's my role here? Like, what is my role? Where do I fit into the scheme of this relationship that's being formed? And it really made me stop. And it was really great to be part of a process, rather than thinking, oh, I'm really this is happening, that's happening, that kind of thing. I was able to step back and reflect and go, there's the incredible primal thing happening with Louise. There's these incredible, powerfully intelligent women being able to help her through that. I am just going to sit and dance with my way in between that incredible thing going on. And for me, that felt like a really beautiful way of integrating myself into the relationship I would have with my children, and that dynamic. I found I saw the incredible power that like the three births are probably the most poignant moments of my life, because it's like you, and I don't know if you guys reflect on this, but it's like when Herbie came out, it was just like this spiritual experience. Like it was just this level of elation. I'm going, and I was just kind of, I don't. It was really interesting when Herbie was born. He took 2 hours to come to bear down. Louise was bearing down 2 hours. So when he came out, and then they put him on the floor, it was like I looked at him as this brand new baby, and I couldn't. It was so raw. I initially didn't recognize. I saw this baby on the floor, and I didn't know what it was. In my mind, couldn't compute. It was just like a blob. And then I just watched as this face formed and this body formed, and it was like this slow motion thing happening. And I stood back, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting, because I watched this child's shape, and suddenly, there he is. And so I very much, it was quite a deeply emotional spiritual experience. And then I thought, well, let's continue to play or try and dance in this way where I see where I fit into this relationship of mother and child. I saw that was like, it's like a deeply primal experience. And then stepping back, where do I move within this? And that was my initial moving into fatherhood right from the off. I thought, where's the play here? Because I saw the play between Louise was breastfeeding, so there was a play with that. I would take, and then it felt like I was like shifting into moving around this relationship that was very primal, and then I would find my place within that. And that was kind of like pretty much with all three, I'd say, although all births are different. If you had like, if you have more children, you guys, the next birth will be different, and the next birth will be different. We know that, and it's just the way that you integrate. You don't think you could love anyone as much as you love that one, and then the next one comes along, and then Ethan came along, and that was a little bit where I was like, oh my god, suddenly we felt a little bit outnumbered, but. Still, it's an incredible privilege, and I mean, we could go on. There's a whole other story around my practice and that, but I think it was just, me like initially noticing the way I was being affected by the process of suddenly this happening, and that really fascinated me. And I think it was really interesting. And I think with the fact that I'd started my sadhana practice at the same time, and it was amazing. It was quite, that initial kind of like vibe you get from just starting the practice and it being amazing. I think I was just actually, well, let's look at what this, like, if I brought the focus of that to this, what do I notice there? And it was really fascinating to see almost like the process of moving into these new beings as part of our lives. At the same time, like I said, I had the responsibility of all that. So I was like, I had my practice, I had work, I had fatherhood, I had all these things. So there was a lot of juggling.
You also had to be a husband. That's
I had a 9 to 5 job. I was an electrician. I was an electrician for 20 years before I suddenly started making this up.
I had talking to you about that. I mean, I was around Scott in the early days, and then, when I stayed at Scott's house, and he hosted me for a workshop, and we had some great discussions about work and children and how to manage that. And it's always beautiful to just see everyone has their own unique situation and their own circumstance and their own karma that they drop into, and it doesn't matter where you're at in it all. I'm very thankful that I have the Ashtanga practice, and I still have it, and yet I'm like Mark, I'm I'm not busting out third series anymore. That's for sure. But it's part of my practice. It's part of my everyday routine, and I still am getting up. There's other things that I've prioritized. You know, there's this whole thing within the Vedic tradition of organizing your life in a particular way, and it's really valid to look at. You know, the four stages of life. It's really it can add some insight into these various aspects of who we are as we evolve. Now, this was set thousands of years ago, but there's still some relevance to the energies that you go through in different periods of your life, from birth until 25, and then 25 to 50, and 50 to 75. They broke it into like
Yeah, it's four stages, right? That's the four stages of the Hindu life, isn't it? There's like, well, history's one of them. The householder stage, yeah.
Yeah, so Mark and Nathan,
I'm a bit late though, man. I was a bit late.
yeah, but that's okay, man, because you've been a yogi, so you're youthful in your energy. See, that's the thing that everybody has to look at and look at in regards to like basically what Scott was talking about in regards to, God, I wish I had a younger dad. Well, you've been doing practices that kept you young, just like me. You know,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm approaching 70 because of the practice and what I did when I started and when I was in my 20s.
Well,
I started when
all
I
you
was
guys do
21,
look
22.
younger than your years, that's for sure. I should
Yeah,
introduce
absolutely.
myself as well, which is, so my
Yes,
name's
please.
Nathan, and I'm like really happy to be here with like just like sort of a group of guys who are so open in your like emotional way of being, that you're like talking about the love that you have and your yoga practice and all that stuff. It's like so beautiful to be with a group of men who can do that, and I think it's really great. So I'm really happy to be here. And myself, I've got a little baby girl. She is about 11 months. Today, I was feeding her pancakes, and she discovered that the pancake could not only go in her mouth, but not also in her hair, and subsequently squashed into her. This is that thing where it's like, okay, we've made these beautiful pancakes, they're like beautiful pancakes, and it's just straight in the hair. So that
Sure,
was,
try it, Nathan. Try it.
I
Smash
should.
it in your beard and in your hair.
Oh
Do it as
man,
well. Smash it all the way around like that.
oh, that would be beautiful. Yeah. So, that was, yeah, I definitely resonated with what you said, Scott, about, because about feeling part of the human race, although that wasn't your words, but that was how I experienced it, where it's like, oh shit, I am part of the human race. Not only that, I'm part of this world, because my practice, because I came from a difficult background, which I've talked about in like various other podcasts, whatever. I was addicted to drugs, and I basically hated myself and the world, sort of stuff. And I managed to get out of that. But like it hinged, and I only realize this now. And if I hadn't have had a daughter or a baby at all, this might not have been the case for me. Where it's having my daughter made me realize that I was still running from the world in some way with my practice, in a kind of wanting to transcend the world
Yeah.
and not be part of it because it was just a horrible place. Not that I consciously thought that. I was pretty
Yeah,
happy
yeah.
and I was a functional human and all that, and I hadn't been clean for a number of years, long time. But I still, on
Trying
some
to escape
level,
samsara,
well, you see,
right?
that's, I wouldn't call it that now. But when I christened this podcast, you're very right. You're very right. When I christened this podcast, that was very much what I was about. Like let's escape
Yeah.
samsara, and now we're stuck with it. Yeah, what can you do?
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah.
No, but it's good. That's
But
what it's about, man.
what having the baby, what having my daughter happened was, now I realize the beauty in humanity and the beauty of the world, and it's like because I just got to this place where I was like, how can how she's such a beautiful thing, and not only is she beautiful, but all humans are therefore beautiful, and the world is therefore beautiful. And my practice has now changed a lot, where I basically switched a lot, and now I'm very into. It's just really changed my outlook for sure,
But
massively.
this is really interesting. Do you mind me asking how long you've been in recovery for?
Oh well, I don't follow the 12-step plan or any of that, uh, so I wouldn't use that language. But I don't know.
Right.
I've been clean for a long time. Like I forget 6 or 7 years, maybe seven
Okay.
years, 8 years. So it feels like a long
And
time.
so, if you don't mind me asking, do you feel like when you had your daughter, it's switched something in you to like to added something to this your sobriety to go? This is now what I can be clean for.
Um, like I said, I don't use that language or view myself as an addict anymore. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a fully recovered addict. I don't view myself as in recovery or needing to maintain
Right. Okay.
anything. I'm that wasn't really part of it. I think there was a deeper thing going on there where my drug addiction was an attempt to get away from a world that I didn't like very much. And then when I practiced, and I'm talking, all kinds of meditation and stuff, on some subtle level, it was still trying to get away from the
Yeah,
world. And now
that's
finally,
exactly
I'm
right.
Yeah.
connected to the world and I have a love for my daughter that expands into the world. And I'm totally stoked to be here, which is fucking great.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's amazing. No, I hope you don't mind me asking, because that's really important. Because I kind of concur with that. I remember, like, we all, when we were young, perhaps you guys did the same, but we all mucked around with and had fun and played around with things. And I came from like I came from quite I came from a childhood that had um, alcoholism in it. My mum is in recovery, and so I was very kind of like when I was became a father, I was very aware around my upbringing and wanting to not pass on those things, because like my mum was my mum's a beautiful woman, right? She's been in recovery now for over 35 years, 30 years, something like that. But all through my childhood she drank, and I kind of got a lot of memories. So I remember, but I remember then coming, leaving home and then playing around with drugs and stuff like that, like we did, and partying and but I remember the moment when Herbie was born. I made a choice, and it was a bit like it landed me back in the world, because I thought to myself, I am not going to do that shit anymore, because I don't want to wait. I don't want him to wake up and not recognize me as someone different. And so that for me was a really interesting, because at the same time, like my practice was really burgeoning. I was really getting the vibe, the height of the Ashtanga practice. It was like, and I'd met quite quickly, I'd met John Scott, who was my teacher and a mentor of mine through that whole period. Now, John, I didn't go to Mysore because we didn't have the opportunity to, but I was very connected to, very connected to the practice, and definitely wanted, as best as I can, an authentic teacher, which is why I've got so much passion for the practice. This is why I connected to someone like Prem early on, because I read his book. I knew the teachers who I wouldn't be able to go and study with Batabi Joyce, but I knew the teachers who had done the work, and I was close, and John was in the country, and I met John in, I think it was quite quickly after uh, Herbie was born, after I started 6 months. And I remember meeting him and going, there's my teacher. I know that, and it was really important that it was him, because he was a father. Like I knew John had 2 kids, and I'm like, well, there's someone, even though he'd done the work like you all done, like Prem and Mark have done, they did all the work and went to India and then had kids. He did the same thing, but he was someone who I could see, who I could emulate, because he was being the father figure and being in the family. And that felt really important to me. So I had these couple of things going on. I had these things where my life was changing because of practice, but also I had a very young family, and also I was changing the way I was wanted to be in myself because of my own upbringing. And that's always been like really interesting, as I've evolved over the years. As the boys have got older, as you'll both find that, like, you evolve with them. Yeah, what was really, really interesting was like probably around about 7 or 8, when suddenly they look at you not as dad, but they look at you with like their own, like he doesn't do this, or he does, with their own kind of way of, you know, of being able to critique you. And I got very like, as soon as I go, especially Ethan, like Ethan, our youngest, he can pull shit on me like that. And I'm like, oh
Yeah,
God.
but they've been doing that for a long time, brother.
You know what I mean? And that's really interesting, that evolution as they get older, of them starting to turn around on you, and you start to continue to look at yourself in a certain way. But also what I wanted to say, and I want to go hark back to what Prem said earlier, is that fatherhood for me has been totally entwined with understanding motherhood as well. And that bond of that connection you have together at that early stage of unity around the evolution of that child into the world has to come together as best you can as a unit.
Well, I'd like to
You know,
get a
so my
question in on
understanding
that.
of fatherhood, like is
For
my understanding of fatherhood is so much about the relationship I've seen between the boys and Louise.
Yeah, so that sort of like feeds into the question I wanted to ask, and we can start with Mark and go next to Prem and Scott on this, where it's like when you hear women in the Ashtanga community talking about motherhood, a lot of it is like, okay, so you know the changes to your body, and how did you sort of come back to practice, and then what did your practice look like? Did you, you know, I was a Finding Harmony podcast with Dina Kingsberg. They were both saying that their practice got stronger when they came back to it. And they were both in third and fourth series a few years later. That's what Dina Kingsberg was saying. And then you listen to other mothers in the Ashtanga community who'll say, oh, it's completely changed. I barely even do that much asana anymore, you know. But as men and fathers, it's a whole different experience, isn't it? So for me, it's almost been more difficult to let go of my asana practice because I technically could still do it. So it's really sort of teaching me to be less selfish and kind of being like, oh, okay, well, I could have a great time on my mat for the next 2 hours. Or like maybe I need to sort of check that and do a bit less and help out more, which is something my wife
Yeah.
would have a lot to say about. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mark, could you talk about that, please?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, it's like Scott was saying, just observing the motherhood thing, like, and I want to just thank you guys for reminding me of the birthing experience, because that was definitely the most profound moment of my life. And I just really resonate with what you're saying about connecting to that, the human race, to that primal energy. Like, it's the only time that you really feel as a human that we're actually animals, right? We're mammals, and like we live so much up in here in our head, but when you were there for the birth and then raising a child that's so vulnerable and just needs you and needs the mother and needs the mother's milk, and just seeing that connection of the breastfeeding, you really realize, oh man, we're animals.
It's like
And
this,
it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. So that, you know, so that has been very profound. But I guess, you know, as the days and weeks and months go on, you start to forget a little bit about all that, and you get back into here and wanting to get back to how life was, or ambitions and so on. Something for me that I've been aware of is like how much like Deepika had to go through physically. And in our case, you know, like we're kind of in the same field, like we're both yoga practitioners, we're both yoga teachers. So it's, you know, a bit uncomfortable in that sense of like you saying, Nathan, like for me, actually, like nothing's happened to me, nothing's changed for me. Whereas for Deepika, she's had to like physically give up a lot. You know, she's still breastfeeding now, so that takes a lot of energy out of the body. So what that's been over Davey's 15 months now plus pregnancy, so it's almost 2.5 years of the body having to really go through a big change. So there's a sense of, I don't know, you could maybe say guilt, like if I'm thriving in my physicality while my wife, who was before at a very high level in her physicality, then having to let go of all of that to bring up our child. There's been, a sense in me, like, I don't want to like put that in her face too much, you know? And then, so there's that aspect, but then there's also been, for me, like, I just love being with my daughter so much that I don't even want to be like away from her for more than an hour and a half. You know what I mean? Like, if I get an hour and a half and I'm starting to be like, oh man, I'm missing her too much, I want to go. That's why I said to you at this thing, you said, what, 90-minute like cutoff point for this podcast? I said, 90 minutes, man, because I can hear her playing outside and I want to get out there.
Nice.
You know, so
great.
Man, that's it. So I think, did I answer the question, Nathan? I don't know. I kind of went around in circles.
I think it's beautiful what you said. So that's really good. Like I definitely resonate with the guilt side of things, you know, because like my wife has not been practicing, and obviously I still can. So that's real. So Prem, how was it for you? You know, because women have the whole physicality, men, we don't have that physicality so much. So how did it affect your practice and your relationship being a father?
Well, I can, again, the memories are coming back with you guys sharing your experience of this phase of your life being a father. And I started to get jealous of the connection that my wife had with Shanti, you know, and Mira, but especially when Shanti first came, you know, there was like this beautiful relationship between mother and child, and the nursing aspect. And I was like, I started to be like jealous. I was like, I wish I could have that kind of connection, you know? And but you know, I mean, that was just, it's not like I wanted to have a sex change or something like that. But there was that bond that's there with mother and child that men can't fathom. You know, come on, you guys, 9 months carrying a baby and then giving birth. I mean, they're warriors. Like it's like so intense, like what they go through. And also just that nurturing aspect of like what you said, Mark, of the baby taking energy from the breast milk that's being created from Deepika, you know, and everything that she's eating and doing is nurturing and nourishing the baby. It all goes to the baby. That's part of the biology that's there, you know. So I have a pretty funny story. I'll share it because I think it's classic. And I don't know what's going on with your mates, and I don't know if you know, Louise had this going on, Scott, but my wife at the time, her breast got really swollen. Like she was pumping milk and she was like giving milk to other babies because she had so much milk. And this one time she looked at me and she said, "Could you please take some of the milk?" And I was like, "Whoa!" It didn't take me long. So it was like, you know, I'm that kind of a person. So I was like, "Yeah, sure." But I said, like, "But Shanti's nursing right now." She goes, "Please, this other one is like so full and she's not getting." So I was like, "This is weird." Like, but all right, I'll go for it. So I go down in there and I get on the nipple right next to Shanti and I start getting the milk out of her breast. And Shanti looks at me. You guys, this was classic. She looked over at me and she had the nipple in her mouth. She looked at me and she got this big grin on her face.
Oh yeah.
And pushed my head away.
Oh yeah.
She pushed my head away.
We do this all the
She was
time.
like,
I do it all
"That's
the time,
mine."
man.
He's like, no,
I do it all the time, but just for fun. I don't actually drink the milk.
Like that's mine. Like, no, man, that's mine. Well, I mean, this
that's
was
mine for
early
like
on,
that dinner.
like, yeah. But it was so cute. It was so beautiful.
Oh yeah, it's the best, man. That little grin, huh? Yeah.
Oh my God, it was classic. She just got this big old grin, and the nipple kind of just flipped out of her mouth, and she just was like, "What? Like, get out of here!" Pushed my head away, and carried
This is
on,
nothing
back at it.
So good, so good.
But there is that going on. I mean, it's classically funny, and there is that aspect. And I'm not saying that every man has had that experience or tried breast milk, but it's
not in that way.
it's the first thing that we get in Ayurveda. It's like sweet. It's the sweet taste, and sweet builds you. It's kapha. So it's like it's really building the baby, And so that's why that's one of the reasons we're so addicted to sweet. Just so you know. And sweet is associated with love. Love is sweet, right? You call your honey sweetie, you don't go, oh hey broccoli, or it's like
That's a good one though.
You bring
broccoli.
with a little broccoli is good, yeah.
So Prem, did you like practice the whole way through, or did you sort of like take a break when you had your baby, or what happened?
No, see, that was part of the thing that I was laughing at with you guys in regards to, like, I was doing this dance and this battle within of like, hey, wait a minute, my yoga practice is really important. And I already had a meditation practice too. I had a 3-hour meditation practice, guys. I was getting up at 3 and meditating until 6. And then I was doing my asana practice. So, and then I was dealing with like, sleepless nights with the baby, and I was helping out. I was doing diapers. We had cloth diapers.
Messy.
Yeah, it's intense, man. But anyway, the aspect of sadhana and keeping my practice on point, I remember vividly, and this was classic, I put it in my book, I think, where I was sitting in my room and she was like banging on my door, just like, I need some help, and I was like, I'm meditating, like I screamed back at her like angry, like I'm meditating, like what do you? So I started to see like, this is not cool. Like I have to like figure out what, the timing, the sequence, how can I help? And I was basically during that particular time frame, all of you are yoga teachers. I was not living off of yoga. I had to do other things like Scott, like he was an electrician. I had to wash windows. I had to wash dishes. I had to work on roofs. I was doing whatever I could to pay and make ends meet because I wanted my wife to stay with the kids. I didn't want her to go away and have to go to work, which is something that everybody's grappling with these days, So, wow, what a balancing act, It's really the art of maintaining meditation, asana practice. Really asana practice is meant, just like what you were saying, Mark, that part of why we do asana, and this is where it gets lost in the mix, of that asana practice is to keep us healthy. It's to keep us vital and energetic for our life. We're householders. We're not the aesthetic yogi that goes off in the mountain and lives in a cave. We have kids. And this is where I saw a split in myself and other people that were coming into yoga. And they were split in this thing about like being brahmacharya and sexuality and all that stuff. Like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't do that. And so everybody that's in the fatherhood realm now, the aspect of you're a householder, you've entered into another phase of your life, another stage of your life. You need to honor that. Just because, that particular stage was not in the sequence classically, you have to see how it fits into your own personal life. So we can't get too religious with it. You have to look at what's going on and approach it appropriately.
Oh, thanks, Prem.
I agree, Prem. It's not because you realize it's just not just about you anymore. And so there's an element, like I love what you said about, it's about, you realize you suddenly realize more about what you're practicing for. It gives you kind of like Nathan, you were saying, like you are suddenly anchored in the world. That anchor is still your sadhana.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're never not learning about yourself when you are with your child. You are never not learning about yourself when you're in the mix of relationship. We work, you know, we look at the practice, right? The practice is all these elements of understanding relationship. It's understanding how I'm working with my breath in my body, how all those kind of subtle things that we are looking internally. But then you start to see that this is also happening right now in relationship with everyone that we integrate with. And the one that you're most connected to is that new, the most primal, which we spoke about earlier, which Mark connected to. And if you connect to that primality, that's a word, but I'll use it. You start to go, but this is never not continuing right now. Like my practice started 6 months after. I mean, I was practicing yoga anyway. But my Ashtanga practice, I feel like my yoga practice started, was 6 months after Herbie was born. So, and I was a householder, and I was at work, and we then had, between 2 years, we had a second one. Between 5 years, we had a third one, and I was still I started teaching then, still working. And so I was balancing a lot of things, but it still came back to, or tried to come back to, how I was for these children, how I was watching myself as I anchored myself as much as I could in their world, because it's just about every moment, right? When you look into that child's eyes, right? Because I've got a brand new niece, so she's coming around today, Sienna. My brother's same age, like 47, just had a new daughter, and I'm so happy for him. And again, I love children. I love them. I pick them up and I'm looking them in the eyes and going, "What are you looking at?" And if you stop and you look and you go, "How are you seeing the world?" It's stunning, because it helps you. It helps you sometimes I go back into that quality and I go, if I was you, I was like you once, how would I be seeing this? Yeah. And so you can't help but not be moved by the experience of the relationship, and to see that these things, like the yoga practice, yes, we're doing Ekam Dway Tri Intertwari, but everything is still fresh. Every breath is fresh. Every time we notice something is fresh, and this really early stage of your life, everything is changing very, very quickly. And you're not only watching your daughters, right, but ultimately you're watching yourself as it's changing. And that's the really important thing. This is what like, I think, and I found I was quite, again, going back to being an early practitioner, watching these play out in me, then watching this play out in relationship to the boys and their growth and their evolution, and then watching myself watching it. It's nothing else other than a continued sense of landing in the world and being self-reflective, yet instead of being in the Sangha or in the ashram, you're in the middle of your life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I was wondering how you ended up learning Ashtanga to the level that you did, given all the stuff you had going on, because there's people with a lot less going on who can't deal with whatever it is, 4, 5, 6 day a week practice.
I mean, it wasn't a 4, 5, 6 day a week practice, not when you've got a 9 to 5 job and you've got 3 children and you've got to do all the things. I practiced when I could, honestly. And but what I did, I practiced when I could, and then I'd go away and I'd go and spend time. I'd do those things where I'd spend time with John for weeks at a time. Louise would, like I said, Louise was an incredible support with all of it. To be able to be
I want to ask that question. If for all of you is how to, like Scott, you've been married now, how many, 20 years with 3 kids. And like, that's another thing, right? Because like what I notice is, because I love my daughter so much, and that's taking so much of my energy each day, I know that I'm probably not giving Deepika as much love as I could, so, and I can imagine that could, after many years, that could start to affect the marriage, so I'm trying to be aware of that already.
Let me go first on this one,
because
I have very little. Let me go first on this one because I've got very little experience, and then we can move on to the to the actual meat. But like,
Yeah.
it's just because I've got a whiteboard, and on the whiteboard is like kind of goals for the week, and date
Yeah.
night is one of them, and then also
Date
like,
night. Yeah.
yep, and then also intentional conversations, which is something that I'm
Yeah.
way more into than my wife. but but
Okay.
like it's good in terms of the just taking some time to sit down and like it's like that dyad work where you sit down and say, okay, 7 minutes on the clock, I will not say a word, tell me how you're doing, right? And then switch, and
Right.
then just
That's the
having,
one.
and also having lunch. We'll have lunch together, you know, because we have a nanny in, so we have time to get lunch
Yeah.
together and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, I suppose I have to put that stuff on a whiteboard, just otherwise it doesn't get done, and I find it's really
But
important.
Yeah.
Nathan, is that your whiteboard or yours and your partner's whiteboard?
That's a good question. I will ask her that.
Because if it's your whiteboard, it's your whiteboard. It's got nothing to do with her. If it's yours and your partner's whiteboard, then it's something you're doing together, and that's what it is. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'll ask her. I say.
But it's a start, though, Scott. It's a start.
I know,
That
but
that
that's the
he's
thing,
thinking
and that's
about
the
it.
thing. You have to kind of stop when you go. Where's the connection? Where's the still the
Yeah.
it takes everything from you, like these children. I like everything you're
It's the
looking.
most challenging thing for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I
You,
mean, that's
you,
what I.
yeah.
That's why I take my hat off to you, Scott. You know, I'm on my third marriage, so success, failure. I don't believe in that. I feel like there's different things that we go through and experiences that we go through, and it's part of our karma, just like Shanti dying. So there's aspects of my life that I look back on and reflect, and I was doing my best at that particular time, you
Yeah.
know. And in order to learn from that, it's good to speak to people like Scott, like me, like other men that have done it and have made mistakes and are succeeding too, to find out what's going on. And
Yeah.
again, like in my time frame, there was, um, I had to do my own kind of research, basically. Again, because I didn't have the internet, so I had to like physically ask different people like what's going on and what's happening in the yoga community. And there was lots of kids running around. But as far as relationship and relating and creating like an intimacy and all that, well, I'm still learning about it. It's still an ongoing process with Radha and managing again in this phase of my life of being a grandfather. And again, it with Nathan inviting me to this discussion, it brought back just a flood of all these experiences that I had, from Shanti's birth to Mira's birth to making money to eating and sleeping and all the stuff that you guys are experiencing early on in your journey of fatherhood. And how do you make it work? Life is a juggling act. And depending on where you're at in your samsara, your samsara hala hala, how do we get out of the samsara? Escaping samsara. It's great. That's what yoga is all about. And the yoga of living life, of everyday living, is really important. The relating, the relationship, and interacting with your wife consciously, and your friends and your students and other people and and your extended community, the globe. It's just like this miracle of being alive. And one thing that's really important that I felt to mention is that, and I know that Scott believes in this and understands it, because when you're in the whirlwind of trying of attempting to do your best in all this and make it work, you definitely have to make a priority of staying healthy. And that's what your yoga practice is about. Now, if you get it through surfing or other things, this is the beauty of the Ashtanga practice, because in a short amount of time, you don't have to do the full practice. This is something that, we talk about all the time, and I'm sure Mark does, and other people, Scott, Nathan is starting to grow with it, of looking at the practice and doing the practice in such a way that you get the most quality out of what you do, you know, in your internal organs and your nervous system and your circulation and all that. And then boom, if you have time, you go surfing, or you know, doing whatever. But that block of time, like sketching it out and having an asana practice, a hatha yoga asana practice, is so important. And the Ashtanga practice is so intense, just like everything that we're experiencing. You know, you don't come to Ashtanga because you're a passive person. You come to it because you're intense. You like the intensity, you like the challenge, right? Part of the intensity is like, okay, now how do you turn that into working with your partner, working with Deepika, working with your partner? How do you do that, you know? And how do you manage it? And stay healthy, eating good, you know, getting enough sleep. That's an issue. I'm sure you guys are going through that. You know, the baby's waking up all the time. Okay, honey, I'll get the baby. Well, you're not nursing, so you know what I mean? Like there's this whole sleep issue. I've gone through all kinds of stuff. And I've always been like a light sleeper. So going through that phase of my life right now, being in my later 60s, I've had a challenge of sleep issues, and that's affected my health. Like if you don't get sleep, man, you know it. You miss one night. I've missed weeks at a time where it's like, Jesus, this is not good, man. I got to figure this out. And that was all because of the grief and stuff that I was going through. So, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's, you know, hold on to the things that are working for you in your asana practice. Make it as juicy and high quality as possible. And keep the elements of the practice, the things that you know. You know what I mean? Like the aspects that you know that work around the bandha and the breath and the sequence, and make it work for you. And I know that's what you guys are doing, and that's what you're experimenting with. So that's cool.
Well,
You
thanks,
know, I
Prem.
think we get a little bit too religious with it.
So, Scott,
Yeah.
do you have anything on Mark's question about, it was around maintaining that connection with your partner, right? Right, Mark?
Yeah.
I mean, you got one, right?
Yeah. So it's three. That's why I'm coming here, man. You're the pro.
Yeah, you know multiplication. Yeah.
There's like, you know, what's really important is, I mean, both of you, what changes, there's, you know, in a family environment, there's been five of us, and there's so many elements to relationship, right? And you have to start looking at the family environment as relationship, as the relationship between, so there's three of you, right? There's a relationship between you and your daughter. There's a relationship between your partner and your daughter. There's a relationship between you, your partner, and your daughter. And there's a relationship between you and your partner. And in our relationship, in my, you know, there's always been relationship between me and Herbie, me and Noah, me and Ethan, Louise and Herbie, Louise and Noah, Louise and Ethan, Herbie, Noah and Ethan, Noah and Ethan, me, Noah and
Okay,
Ethan.
Scott. All right.
You know,
We got it.
But ultimately, so you're looking at all of these relationships, and you have to. It's about looking at them all and going, how can I hold them all? How can I give them all of them a balance? And so that right from the outset, there's an understanding this is going on. Of course, everything is about your daughter, right? But you do have to look up and go, hi. Hi again, you know what I mean? And also you have to, this is why you understand that the practice is about relationship. The practice, Prem's right, there's a healthy thing, but then yoga practice becomes about the way that you then interact.
Yeah.
The way that you interact, the way that you're changing, the way that you have to start watching your own biases around how things were and going, oh, you know, I'm changing, they're changing, you know, and understanding their changes. And this understanding about being a unit together as best you can of being a unit together to be able to parent together, but also to be able to be a unit together to grow as a couple together, because you will inevitably grow as a couple because of this new child in your life. The child elevates the relationship, because there's something you are experiencing as a man, your partner is experiencing as a woman, and then you are honoring that in each other, and then lifting that and taking it onto a new place, because it has to be. You are not changed by the experience of being a parent. So you have to think around, for me, this kind of like, there's new ways of seeing each other. Both times when Louise gave birth, it was just like, what an incredible, powerful woman.
And do you guys have a whiteboard? Do you have any, like, do you have like any, like, you must sit down sometimes and have discussions about like where you're going with it all. Like, have you got any like tips on like what have you guys found works? Like, do you have the date night, or do you have any of that stuff?
When you've got 3, it's like really, it's quite full on. And so you do have to spend time to have like some meals together and stuff like that. But also there's an element of actually just enjoying the new family life together.
Yeah.
If you can enjoy the family life together, it's like you're still together. And then maybe after, like, when they're older and they can start to look after themselves, you look up at each other and you go, oh, hi. Hello again. You know what I mean? That way. But there's a change in the relationship that I think in the relationship with you and your partner, that you have to evolve as well. And I think it can be incumbent in the relationship of the family environment. You move as a unit, and then guys can step away and then be together. But it does change, and I think you have to listening's really important. And also not jumping on things. You have to, again, I come back to this idea of the practice. I mean, ultimately I say to my students, and I think it helped me to become quite a compassionate teacher. Because I see people come in and go, what is it you're actually practicing for? What are you practicing for now? And it's almost you're practicing for to be more present with the things that are happening in your life. And if we're more present to the things that are happening in our lives, we're more present to all the things as they're happening. So the things that you think you can actually, there's no blueprint to any of this. You know your relationships. You know how to nurture them. You know both how much love you have for your daughters. You know how much love you have for each other. Those things subtly shift all the time, and your practice, the way that you're practicing, should be allowing to be able to see the flow of that, rather than thinking, I should be doing this. There is an element, Nathan, I would get yourself a whiteboard with your partner, so you both have a pen, and she can rub out that talking thing, and is there a way we could do this?
Yeah, so I think more of a gestalt is what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's, because it's what it is. It's like in this early stage, it's you're a group, your community, you're if you've got a loving relationship, then it's set. You want this to work, but you'll do it as a kind of as a unit, and you grow and you listen. Listening is really important. And listening to yourself as you're listening, which is to me what the practice of yoga is. It's what all those kleshas are going to come up like this and smack you around the head. All those kleshas. Oh, I want to do my practice. I want that raga practice. No, like perhaps that's not appropriate at the moment. Perhaps I need to be present to my wife. Can I bring then the quality of why I would have been practicing to what's needed now? And can I that's why I love the work of Michael Stone and like bringing yoga and Buddhism, and actually not like transcendence, vertical transcendence, but horizontal transcendence, where we actually, our practice merges into the world in a way of relationship, of actually seeing our place and going, oh no, this is what's needed. It's letting go of holding on to something and going, it has to be like this, and go, actually, well, what if I didn't hold on so much anymore? What if became, which is what I love about what Mark's been, what if everything became spontaneous instead? And you perhaps you did have that strict time. You go, well, this is my asana practice. Or perhaps for a few weeks or months, Nathan, you went, you know what? I'm going to just flow in. I'm going to practice every day. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I'm going to flow in with the flow of what's happening with this relationship now. And that includes the way I can be present to my partner with what she needs, the way I can be present to my child with what they need. And importantly, then from there, well, how can I be present to myself when I have some time to myself? And so we take, I very saw much that was how my practice had to be. And it felt like I didn't have that. I still know people who they've got kids and they get up at 2 o'clock still, 1:30 to practice and then go and open up their shala. And I'm like, how are you doing that? And like, if you can do that, brilliant. If you can, the family can move its way around that. But I felt to me, I had to be far more fluid in the way that I responded to what was being required. And that felt really healthy for me, because it means I didn't have a 6-day-a-week practice because I couldn't, because the responsibilities were incredible. But when I had the time to, I gave myself to that time. And when I wanted to, I really, really got the practice. And early on, I thought I connected with Prem, because Prem was became a brother, like in the late, the first part of the last, 2008, I think we met. And I saw him and I'm like, there's someone who I'm going to follow or probably know for the rest of my life, because there's someone who I can deeply understand as a father. I reached out to the people who were parents, who were fathers like me, and went, what are they doing I can recognize? And so I think there's something about letting go of slowly letting go of things as you knew them, and stepping into the unknown with the things you've already, with the practices you already have, and see what happens. Because the practice is for life, and the practice molds itself around the situations that we have. And I think that's when you're in that environment of everything's, you're trying to hold on to it. Don't hold on to it. Allow it to evolve as it will. And that's how, for me, it felt like I could move with it, because there was so much going on. Like Prem said, like I had all of these things, work, mortgage, all of these things playing out. And but I kept on the path of, well, I want to do this practice. I want this to be central to my life. I want to be able to teach my soul one day. So I just kept that until everything else fell away. I lost friends because it just became about the family and this deep passion I had for Ashtanga, and seeing and connecting to the people who I really related to, which was like, which is like I love meeting and connecting with people who I really relate to, which is like I've known Mark, I've known Prem for years, which is like I've connected with Mark in the last couple of years, because I see people who are like me. And I think it's really important to have these people to bounce off of in our lives.
Yeah, thanks.
So there's a fluid nature. There's a real fluid nature I think you can just fall into. So it's like you have to let go a little bit and allow it to form itself.
Thanks, Scott. That's definitely brilliant advice, and something that I would love to emulate, and will try to emulate for sure. Letting go is sometimes difficult for me, but the more you can do it, the better it seems to be. So thanks. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to just touch on masculinity as a thing, because so obviously we are like infinite consciousness beyond men, but we're also men, and you've got to be a man before you can be anything else, I reckon. And what's interesting about fatherhood for me has been it's sort of it's sort of called I've had to call upon my masculine a lot more than I used to, in a kind of like way. And I'm talking about masculinity in a more like yogic sense, as an energy, not as a gender. But in calling on that kind of like spacious, like Shiva like situation where you're holding things. And I feel like my wife has brought that out of me a little bit, although I don't know what she'd say about that if she was here. But you know, she needed, she was going through such a crazy biological, earthy, ecological thing going on. And I feel like what was being called out of me was much more of that kind of like the more sort of expansive masculine that's able to hold things and not react and get caught up in the drama of it all. And that's been very good for me. And it's also challenged my masculinity in a lot of ways. So she has a much better job than me. So right now she's doing a lot of the money earning. And there's a lot of traditional masculine samskaras in my brain going, well, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So that's what I live with, right? So maybe we could go Mark, Prem, Scott again, and do you any of you relate to that? And what's your experience been?
Yeah, I relate to that totally. That, I mean, it comes back a lot to that primal energy, doesn't it? Just suddenly you're a father and you're the protector, the provider in some sense, even if it's not financially, still you're providing, to be there and providing that support and that stability. And I feel that's been brought out in me, like you say, like not getting caught up, not reacting, trying to stay as the steady sort of grounded presence, so that in the storm and the craziness of it all, there's somebody who's there who's like just like a rock, basically. Like that's, I think Deepika would agree that I've been like a rock through the last 15 months. I think she was a bit scared when she felt pregnant. She thought that because I was like kind of, you could say, maybe selfish in the way I was living, just everything was about me. So she was very scared that when our daughter came along, that I would still continue to be everything about me. So I think she would say that I've grown into that role of being, being a father, being a husband, being there for the family, being that support. And that's what she says to me. You're like our rock. And I think so. In terms of masculinity, that's really made me feel the power of being a man in that sense. I mean, I hadn't really even thought about it until you made me articulate it in this way. But I feel more masculine in that sense since becoming a father, definitely.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's great,
thanks,
Mark.
thanks, Mark. Like, what do you think, Prem?
Well, again, I have many years to think back at the place of where you guys are at right now and different circumstances. And, um, the challenge is of holding that state of masculinity in the presence of what you're involved with. And there was, for me also, as I've spoken already, there was a selfishness in regards to what I was doing. And then the moment Shanti came, and I knew it, I felt it intuitively that I was going to be a father. And actually, when I was in India, my spiritual teacher, at that particular time, I got initiated into a path, like I said, where I was getting up at 3 and meditating until 6. And I would just wanted to stay in the ashram. I just wanted to stay and meditate and do my practice. And I just wanted to be like this aesthetic kind of guy. But he saw through that and he saw my karma and he said, you need to leave. You have other things to do. And I said, please let me stay. And he said, no, you go. And I went back to America and boom, got married, had kids, and my life completely changed. It wasn't the same anymore. And I had to really look at that aspect of being selfish and approaching yoga in a particular way and integrating, like Scott's saying, around relating and relationship, it's been a challenge for me. You guys you're you know, um, millions of years ahead of me in regards to, you know, just what you're doing. And I just, it's beautiful to hear, you know. That's part of my challenge through my whole life. And it's my own karma of relating and having relationships. And I pray that you guys, you know, do what you can in regards to your masculinity and working with your woman to stay together in this. It's a very challenging aspect to hold the masculine and also to be there for the woman who takes on all of these things of the nurturing and all that. And I think they have, you know, what I've seen in my journey with just like you guys that have taught yoga for a long time, that we're predominantly around women. And maybe there's some women watching this. I don't know. You know, it's really interesting how the women and me having two daughters, it was one of my most serious talks. And Scott, you can't relate to this at all because you have boys. So that the discussion that I had with my daughters was, please, Shanti, Mira, and this was when they were, you know, teenagers. And there's also that element of watching, you know, watching them grow up, but also watching me grow up, you know, because they're like little sponges and they're watching everything that you're doing. What you're doing in your life, they take that on. And thankfully, they saw a particular quality in me that really resonated as a man, you know, and seeing that in a man. And also just the love that I had, you know, from that standpoint. So in regards to what the talk that I had with them was, please maintain your femininity within this man's world. It's run by this energy that's in this constant kind of masculine way. How can you be women in regards to everything that's going on in your life? You know, and I saw that in Shanti, and I'm seeing it in Mira with her new baby. But I saw it in Shanti of like, she had this energy and she kept her femininity, which was so beautiful to see. And I really, you know, they laughed at me because they were like, oh yeah, sure, Dad. You know, because I'm mostly like, I was more of a friend to them than like the father figure, you know. But I really maintained that aspect through different phases of their life. Of you're in a phase right now with small babies of being the man and being the protector and the provider, you know, and doing whatever you can. Now, Nathan, you're in a position of, you know, being in more of a woman's role. That's okay. That's cool, because I was having to see that also of taking care of the girls, changing diapers, doing all that stuff that didn't look real masculine, but I enjoyed it. Just like, you know, Mark can't wait to get off this call to go be with his daughter, you know, to play with her. So again, it's this juggling act like I talked about in the very beginning. And blessings to all of you out there and to you guys in your journey. And Scott, thank you for sharing your wisdom about, you know, holding it down and being the rock that you are in your relationship. It's beautiful.
Nice, thanks, Prem. So, Scott, do you want to sort of finish the discussion off? Masculinity, fatherhood. You could sort of start anywhere, I guess.
I think it's difficult, you know, because I when we look at the concepts of like masculinity and femininity, you know, more and more recently, I'm seeing all the layers in between that, and I think, you know, this is a whole other conversation, I think, but I think there's this, so we could call them, Nathan, those masculine tropes about I'm a man and this is what I, it sounds like that's what you're, I'm a man, I should be doing this. And because I'm not doing this and you're doing this, I'm feeling less of myself. And it's almost like it's another thing we want to see how we can just notice. We've got 3 boys, and right from an early age, Louise was trying to empower them to understand feminine, so that they can understand, or there's an element of understanding the femininity within them. And I think there is definitely, as a parent, as a father, you want to understand that there's layers to the way that we interrelate. For me, definitely, I want to understand that I want the boys to see that there's a beauty in the world, the beautiful power of femininity, and that they can be absorbed into that as much as they can be absorbed into the masculine. And that there is this kind of like, yes, there's one end masculinity, yes, there's the other end femininity, but everything in between is a stunning array of understanding who you are. And that even us now, even us 4 here, can look at that if we were really truthful and go, well, where do I sit? How can I relate in ways that I don't know yet, that are needed? And I kind of push back a little bit of going, oh, this is like, I got a friend, one of my close friends who became the house husband because his wife worked in the city. She made a fortune. So he took control of being a parent, and he totally fell into that and was like, cool. Because that was what was required. Yeah. Now, I don't know whether that's him going anything less than being masculine or feminine, whether he just moved into the role of what was needed at the time. And so we do have in yoga, we do have these big tropes of masculine, feminine, Shiva, Shakti, all that kind of thing. But we need to be able to sit and go, there's so much more, which is moving in between that. Where do we relate to that? And most importantly, how is that being, you as a male, your daughter's a female at the moment, and then how is that kind of relating? And it's just another beautiful way of understanding relationship, the relationship between male and between female, and that all of the thing that's between that. And if you can kind of like sit in the middle of that and go, where am I think that's the best way to move forward.
That's beautiful. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this call. Yeah, we'll put links to all your stuff. Scott, you've got the Still Points podcast. Mark, you've got some badass online courses. Prem, you've got one of the most beautiful shalas in the world. So everybody check out these guys. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining us.
All right, thanks, Nathan.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah.